farm near High Wycombe, Bucks, is owned by John Lintern and is one of the largest turkey farms in Great Britain, with an output of 20,000 growers and 40,000 killed birds a year. The rearing methods employed on the farm vary from the familiar motley brooders and John Lintern's own haybox system to rearing in battery and infrared brooders in these buildings. Housing of the growing birds includes a number of covered straw yards, each holding about 250 birds of the same age and sex. These are supplemented by a number of open yards, each taking approximately 500 birds destined for early killing. The open yards are of various types and include this block of Temperton yards. Additionally, there is a yard attached to each infrared brooding house, and these can hold as many as 2,500 birds when required. Finally, when there is pressure on the available yard space, a large-scale open range holding as many as 3,000 birds is brought into use. But let us call on John Lintern himself to take over the story. Okay, John?
Well, I'll do my best. First and foremost, I'm not a breeder, I'm a grower. And that means to say that I have to rely on breeders for my stock. That doesn't mean to say that I just wait for poults to arrive. In actual fact, I take a keen personal interest in the selection and the breeding of the stock which I buy, and I pay frequent visits to the farms from which they come. Once the poults are here, however, the responsibility is ours, and their future depends on good housing, good feeding, good management, and the strictest of hygiene. I use 3 rearing systems: the battery brooder, the infrared brooder, and the well-known motley system. This system combines a heated brooder in which the birds are confined for the first 4 weeks, and a veranda to which they are given gradual access as they grow. Here we see a line of the motley brooders being filled with a day's intake of poults. Holding 65 birds per unit, the motley system is particularly good for disease control, and it turns out a first-class bird. On smaller farms than ours, it can be used as a means of housing birds from day old to killing. But in our case, we remove the birds at 8 weeks, de-beak them, and house them in large groups in covered yards, except for the last batch of the season, which stay in the verandas until maturity. For large-scale brooding, we use the battery brooder system. This house contains 3 lines of brooders with a capacity of 11,000. The poults come in at day old and stay here for 3 weeks. The units are heated by thermostatically controlled electrical elements. For the first week or so, a light is shone on the food troughs, since it is most important that the young poults should clearly see their source of food, or they will tend to starve themselves. The poults stay in the brooder until 3 weeks of age, and are then de-beaked and moved to rearing quarters, according to the accommodation available. Another of the several rearing methods we use is the haybox system of my own design. This line of haybox units is being prepared to receive a batch of 3-week-old poults from the battery brooders. Heat is maintained in these brooders solely by the insulating properties of 2 sacks of hay. The poults are confined to the brooder section for a short period, after which they are gradually acclimatized to the open run. Here they remain until they are 8 weeks of age, when they are moved to the covered yards. And now, before we move on to our third and major rearing system, let us look into the yarding accommodation on the farm. First, there are the covered straw yards, each section of which holds 250 birds. If circumstances permitted, I should prefer to use only covered yards, as the one thing we farmers cannot control is the unpredictable weather. However, for many reasons, and particularly economic ones, we are obliged to supplement our covered areas with various types of open yards. but we prefer to confine the use of these to the summer months. Wherever possible, I try to do without perches, since I believe they tend to spoil breast conformation, and we find that the birds rest quite comfortably on straw bales and the litter itself. The birds feed from our own farm-designed hoppers, each holding 2,500 weights of food. In the height of the summer, the earlier reared birds, that is, those due for killing in July and August, are moved onto open yards. Each of these takes about 500 birds, and once again, unless the weather forces us, we prefer to do without perches. As for open range, we use it when we have to, for with 60,000 birds to house over a season, there is often no choice. But wherever possible, we try to ensure that the birds on range and in the open yards are restricted to those intended for early killing. Now we come to the infrared brooding system, which we have found to be the most efficient for the large-scale turkey farmer. These buildings measure 150 feet by 33 feet and hold 2,500 birds. The poults can either be started at day old or when they come from the battery brooder at 3 weeks of age. Infrared lamps are hung adjacent to the feeding and watering troughs. The poults are confined to the house until they are 8 weeks of age. At that time, the partitions separating the house from the attached yard are removed. In the first instance, the birds need to be driven outside, but it takes them very little time to become acclimatized to their new environment. The birds use both the yard and the house, and here they remain as a flock until they are ready for killing. This lot's doing well.
It's fine.
Now about this important question of feeding. Some farmers prefer to mix their own rations. Well, I don't. Experience has shown me that the average farmer has neither the time, the facilities, or the know-how to mix a fully balanced ration, particularly when it comes to such important items like trace elements, vitamins, etc. I'm quite convinced that the more reputable manufacturers of feeding stuffs are far better equipped to provide what, after all, is the lifeblood of an enterprise such as this than the farmer himself. I buy a proprietary range of foods suitably formulated for each stage of rearing. Though in some cases individual handling of the food is necessary, the majority of our feeding is done on the bulk principle, with the merchant delivering his supplies direct from lorry to food hopper. In this way, we cut down the job of individual handling to a minimum, and so obtain an important economy in both time and labor. Incidentally, we use turkey starter crumbs with antibiotics and sulfaquinoxaline until 8 to 10 weeks of age, and from then on we feed turkey rearing pellets. By July, the first batches of birds are ready for killing, and the final phase of our annual operations begins. Of course, the first to be killed off are any birds that are on open range, and the job of collecting each day's batch is one that calls for gentle, patient rounding up. Otherwise, on a range of this size, you will soon get pandemonium. Turkeys dry quite easily, providing they are handled quietly and slowly. And though it appears to be a longish job, it saves endless time compared with the task of crating the birds, and 3 or 4 experienced hands can easily handle a batch of about 250 at a time. Once inside the shed, the birds are driven into holding pens from which they are taken for killing as required. Up to 1956, we hand-plucked approximately half of the 40,000 birds we killed annually, and these were mostly sold straight from the racks, with only 2,000 or 3,000 birds going into deep freeze. Now, all our birds are processed and quick frozen on the farm, and hand-plucking is no longer carried out. The oven-ready process begins with machine plucking. The birds are first plunged for a prescribed length of time into a thermostatically controlled tank of hot water to loosen the feathers. The plucking machine completely cleans the bird in less than 30 seconds, and very little hand finishing is required. Following the machine plucking, the tendons are pulled, and once this has been done, the birds go into the main preparation room. In addition to our full-time staff, seasonal help, mostly recruited from nearby villages, is engaged, and these work with us right through the killing season in the job of preparing the oven-ready birds. Most of the workers in this department are old friends who come to us year after year, and whose interest in the job and skill ensures that this important phase of preparation is thoroughly carried out. In spite of the wholesale nature of the processing, involving the handling of some 500 birds each day, the pride these workers take in their job ensures that each bird is treated individually. One might say as though it were intended for their own Christmas dinner. The final stage of the oven-ready process takes place on the cryovac packing machine. Having been thoroughly cooled, the carcass is placed in a transparent plastic bag from which the air is extracted by this machine, which at the same time seals the neck of the bag. Finally, the packed carcass is dipped into a bath of hot water, which has the effect of shrinking the plastic container so that it envelops the bird in a tight-fitting protective skin. So throughout the day, the output of vacuum-packed birds is kept on the move, with a minimum of delay between processing and quick freezing. From the processing section, the sealed carcasses are taken to the refrigeration unit, where they are quick frozen to 10 degrees below zero, and are then held at 0 or just below. The unit comprises 10,000 cubic feet of deep freeze cabinets, with a total capacity of some 10,000 birds, and here they are stored until required for delivery. I personally inspect every batch of oven-ready birds before they leave the farm, and in this way we know that every turkey we turn out leaves us with the assurance that it is going to be consumed by a satisfied customer. We pay a great deal of attention to careful, hygienic packing, for I am convinced that good presentation of the finished article is an essential sales factor. Every bird is packed in its own individual carton. The container is lined with wood wool, which not only protects the carcass, but acts as an insulating medium, keeping the product rock hard for several days. Cooking instructions are added to each packet. Nothing is more important in turkey farming than good hygiene. And with 60,000 birds passing through in a season, the annual clean-out becomes a major operation. And I may say, it is not often we get weather like this at the time this job has to be done. From the end of December until our first pelts arrive, there is hardly a living animal on the farm. Houses and yards are mucked out, and every section is thoroughly cleaned. A mobile steam cleaner ensures that the smaller units, like these motley verandas, are thoroughly disinfected by steam sterilization. Everything movable on the farm is hand-scrubbed. Thus, when the first pelts arrive, the bacteria cycle has been broken, and the farm starts as new. Our mortality this year was 2.9% from 1 to 3 weeks, and 1.5% from 3 to 8 weeks, which I consider most satisfactory for large-scale production. It is also a tribute to my staff, for in the long run it is their loyalty and cooperation that makes the wheels turn in an enterprise of this nature, which, as you must have seen, cannot be run as a one-man show. Our keynote is individual responsibility within the framework of a team. But however widely you allocate tasks, it is the men in charge on whom the final responsibility falls, from the foreman to the manager, whose responsibility never ends from the time the first pelts arrive.
Well, there's the story of the yearly routine at Hopper's Farm. Of course, we've only been able to skim the surface, and I do hope we haven't given you the impression that turkey farming is an easy task which always runs to a set of golden rules. I can assure you that it isn't. Nothing calls for more vigilant care than the rearing of a turkey from pelt to maturity. And when that is extended to a throughput of 60,000 birds, the responsibilities and anxieties sometimes make you wish you'd chosen an easier way of earning a living. We have tried to show you in this film some of the factors which contribute to our success. And we hope that here and there you have spotted an idea which could be adapted to your own farm.